It was back in June when I began my walk along the Ridgeway, my first multi-day expedition, and the plan was to complete it across 5 consecutive days. I had everything mapped out, from my accommodation for each evening to the public transport links that would get me back to my car. In my rucksack, I had enough food and snacks to last me for 5 days, along with all of my camping equipment. I was late arriving in Swindon and consequently missed the first bus to depart for Avebury by a matter of minutes. With an hour to spare, I headed off to the town centre in the hope of finding a vacant toilet. The loos at the bus station were locked, allegedly to stop drug users from shooting up inside, and I didn't find any toilets at the train station over the road. It took me a very long time to find the toilets upstairs in McDonald's. I cannot tell you how uncomfortable I was, having driven for 90 minutes and now to be rushing about the town centre like Challenge Annika, but with a 65-litre rucksack on my shoulders. Naturally, as I returned to the bus station, the second bus was pulling away. I was spending the next hour sat on my rucksack and waiting for bus number 3. 30 minutes after that, I was outside the Red Lion pub in Avebury. From there I walked 2 miles south and parallel to the road, which would bring me to the A4, from which I could reach Overton Hill, the western start point of the Ridgeway, via the Sanctuary, which is one of several historic sites nearby. Finally, I was on my way, albeit 2 hours later than planned. This section of the Ridgeway is a public byway that's open to cyclists and motorbikes outside of the winter time. This means it's deeply rutted and uncomfortable to walk on in places, as well as being hard under your feet. I was about 2 miles into my walk when I first noticed a pain down the outside of my left leg. I pushed on to Hackpen Hill at the 4-mile mark, where I would take off my pack and rest briefly and stretch. But 10 minutes after that, the pain returned. If you're familiar with IT band syndrome, that's what it felt like. A pain running down the outside of my leg, from my hip down to the outside of my knee. I'd never suffered this down my left side before, although last year I had a similar problem with my right leg. But a few sessions with a physio corrected the misalignment of my hips. Some of the scenery here was beautiful, even where the going was hard. I was grateful to reach Barbury Castle, where I would rest for a few minutes and give my feet a break from the chalk. More stretching followed, only for the pain to return later. Where I would normally eat sandwiches on a walk, my snacks for the day consisted of breakfast bars, homemade flapjack and biscuits. It wasn't as filling as I would have liked it to be. About 10 miles into the trail, I passed the village of Ogbourne St George, where there used to be a campsite until a few years ago. There really aren't many camping options in the western half of the Ridgeway, unless you're prepared to head several miles off trail each time. There's also a water tap at South End, not to be confused with South End, which I was looking forward to, but it wasn't signposted and I couldn't find it at the time. I've since read that it's on someone's private property and you need to ask their permission to use it. I struggled up this next slope, soon overtaken by a runner from behind. Into the early afternoon, the heat was intensifying, and I knew that I was still 15 miles from my campsite. Doubts were beginning to set in. Would I be able to walk that far? How practical would it be to leave the trail early and return to my car in Swindon? I already knew that I wouldn't be walking any further than day 2. Having passed a number of cyclists who'd commented on the size of my rucksack, I found a fallen tree beside the track and sat here for lunch. Looking on towards Liddington Hill, where I'd hoped to stop for lunch, but I was falling far behind. Sod's Law states that there was an actual bench on the other side of the upright tree I had perched next to. While I sat here contemplating and overthinking, a growing number of walkers overtook me, bearing tiny day packs and a bib number on their backs. I would soon learn that they were taking part in a charity event called the Ridge Walk. Their challenge was to walk 52 miles in 24 hours, which includes walking through the night. I spoke to a few of them who were encouraging and supportive of my effort to walk the Ridgeway in 5 days. I didn't mention my injury or the fact that I was carrying nearly 20 kilograms, but I felt as though 1 or 2 had noticed I was struggling. 5 or 6 miles from the campsite, I wanted to drop my pack on the floor and give in, but I found inspiration in the thought of reaching the next water tap at Idstone Barn. I was confident it would be there. I'd seen it in the videos by Wiltshire man. I drank a good litre of water while the Rich Walk contestants, carrying their small plastic bottles, bizarrely walked on. Eventually I did reach Waylands smithy. I'd been here once before on a day walk. If there weren't other people around with their kids, I might have stopped here to cook my dinner. From then on it was almost downhill all the way to my campsite. I just had to get up and over White Horse Hill. At least the path that leads the trail was well signposted, even if the tea room would be closed before my arrival. I spent the night at Britchcombe Farm campsite. It was only £8 for the privilege, and I would recommend it to anyone else walking the Ridgeway. With the benefit of hindsight, I think I should have tried to reduce my 25-mile day with a wild camp somewhere. Not that I was feeling confident about such an idea. I believe the pain in my leg was caused not purely by the excessive weight I was carrying, but by how I had packed my rucksack, with the load distributed unevenly. While I was relieved to have completed day 1, I knew I wouldn't make it on with day 2. I had not enjoyed the experience and felt the pack constantly bearing down on my hips. With thanks to a friend who drove from Bristol to collect me, I would be heading home the next morning. If I wasn't going to backpack the Ridgeway in 5 days, I would have to find another way. Thanks for watching this video. I apologise for the lack of video footage in this one. I set off without a power bank, and I'm very conscious of how filming a walk can very quickly drain the battery. I promise you that the next 4 videos to follow will have improved in that respect.